Last in Line Nation, welcome to another episode of Project 222. And we got another guest brought to you today, another ex-college athlete balancing faith in that environment as a high-profile athlete, and the struggles that come with it, challenges that come with it, but also the victories that come out of it. As you know, this is right out of the Bible. Project 222 comes from 2 Timothy 2:2. That says, take what I have taught you, teach it to other faithful men so that they can teach others as well. And we're going to do that. We're going to live it out. And I'm going to bring a guest to you today, and I'm going to introduce him. So his name's Isaac Williams, and born and raised in Southern California, currently lives in California. He played a lot of high level football. He was a defensive back, played cornerback, was a superstar in high school. He first team all conference, got invited to play in an all-star game as a senior. And, you know, what I like about his story is that, man, he had to overcome some stuff. And we're going to get into that a little bit. He played college football at Linfield University in McMinnville, Oregon, just out maybe an hour outside of Portland. Played 4 years of ball, but he had an injury in high school that led to having a surgery and ended up redshirting his freshman year. But what I noticed interesting is that the following years in college ended up having a season-ending injury every season. And you talk about having to deal with some mental struggles attached to that, and some of the things that come along with that I can't wait to dive into. And so he graduated in 2018 with a double major, finance and economics. Man, bless your heart. I'm glad there's guys like you, because that is not my wheelhouse. But works for a company in Carlsbad right now, a telecommunications company in finance. So without anything else, let's welcome Isaac Williams to the show.
Yeah, thanks, John. Appreciate you having me.
Man,
Yeah,
it's good to meet new people, man. I want to maybe tell some audience something about you or something else I might have left out that'll help them connect.
yeah, for sure. I'm the oldest of four siblings, so I have two younger sisters who are one's a year and a half younger, and then one's 18, and then I got a little brother who's 12. So there's quite a gap there. But yeah, super blessed to be on here and be able to share a little bit of my story.
That's cool. Yeah, I have four kids myself. So being the oldest, man, you got a lot to live up to, a lot of examples to set,
Oh yeah.
a lot of standards to uphold. So that's good. It's good to be a leader in that way, man. I guess some context around this, not that it isn't pretty straightforward, but for the audience, we talk a lot about what Christian athletes are going through right now. And there's a lot of great organizations that are out there to help them stay connected, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, among others. And I still think that it presents a set of challenges anyway. Even if you're a Christian walking onto a campus, man, that doesn't necessarily guarantee you of anything, right? You're not entitled to this good, I don't know, peaceful existence always, unless you seek out opportunities to live that out, unless you seek intentionally those resources that are available. So not everybody does that. But what I want to hear from you, man, is it all kind of starts with leadership and mentors and good examples that you see when you step on college campus. Who is out there for you? Who are those people or that person that kind of led that example and was available for you to kind of hold on to along that ride?
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, just to start off, I've been, super thankful. I've had a lot of people invest in me, and so it's kind of set the foundation for how I lived my life in college. And one of the things that was cool about Linfield is the head coach on the coaching staff was a Christian, and so although I didn't go to a Christian school necessarily, a lot of the principles that he reinforced in the program were biblical principles. And so that was super encouraging coming into college, knowing that I had somebody who was going to stand up for what was right and people on the team didn't necessarily know they were buying into that sort of culture necessarily, but it created a culture of accountability. And so that was a huge foundation in looking at the coaching staff. I think I can't not answer this question without mentioning my dad. I've been blessed to have super great parents, and my dad is someone who led by example. He's someone who taught me how to work hard and how to submit to authority, even when you don't agree with their decisions sometimes, and how to trust the Lord in the midst of the unknown. And when you come into college, there's a lot of unknown, both relationally, athletically, academically. It's a new season and you don't necessarily know what to expect. And so that was a huge part for me.
Yeah, no, it is. And like I said, you have all these foundations hopefully set when you get into that, because so that you're not, just light years behind the curve from a spiritual standpoint. But, even though you are set up good foundationally, it like we said, it doesn't automatically just happen. So it's good that you could kind of go from your dad's leadership and ongoing. Obviously a parent is still with you through college, but then have somebody day to day, like a coach, that actually lives out those principles and tries to execute that framework of a plan. And that's awesome. And like you said, you mentioned you didn't go to a Christian university, but were you able to latch on to kind of a group of guys that might be like-minded with you, or what was the challenge there?
Yeah. So it was definitely hard at first, and there wasn't a ton of guys where it was evident that they were, living their life for the Lord. But there were a few guys. And I think the biggest thing initially when I got to college was finding those guys and getting plugged into a church right away, and being able to be in fellowship with those guys and go to church. A big part of my college experience too was Young Life. And so it was super cool to not only be in fellowship with other athletes and my teammates, but also those on campus that were, trying to live on the narrow path. And so obviously when you're on a team and you're in the trenches day to day, those relationships are hard to come by or hard to pass up. And it's super cool to grow in depth with those people who are going through those same struggles, day-to-day struggles with you, especially on a football team where, the culture in football is, not predominantly, up to standard, or, people live according to their own desires and their own wants, and will step on people to get that. And so,
Yeah, football is kind of unique, I would say, because it's just a bunch of hard guys, that are, if you're not running somebody over, you're getting run over pretty much. And that sort of translates, I guess, in just sort of the everyday life and mentality, and just, you got to be locked into that hungry, attitude. But, yeah, it's hard, because I would say, like you mentioned, making sure that you got connected in a church and those kind of things. And with the list of obligations and responsibilities that college athletes have, let alone football, because I know that's just, that's a rigor that is not for everybody. But, in that list of priorities, something usually falls by the wayside. It's hard to carve out margin for every single thing. And unfortunately, what I've seen is sometimes the spiritual side kind of falls off, right? Because I'll get to it later, kind of gets bit by that bug, right? I'll get to it later, and then we never get to it. And so, man, what's a challenge that you're seeing? Like, you've been there, you've done it, you've lived it. What was a challenge you had, or what was a challenge that maybe you saw some guys having that had all the good intentions, right? Spiritually, but what's a challenge that you're seeing amongst that college athlete? Because it hasn't been that long since you've been out, so it's relevant.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I realized when you get to college, college is the first time a lot of people have the autonomy in what they choose to do.
Right.
And when left to our own devices,
Yeah.
we quickly gravitate towards our fleshly desires. And so I
Sure.
think it causes you to be in positions where you're asked to compromise your convictions. And so whether that be, partying or language or, sexual purity,
Yeah.
it can become a snowball effect. And before you know it, you have things taking the place of God, and you either don't realize it or you flat out know, but no longer bat an eye towards it. And so, it's kind of cliche, but the little things quickly become significant, and the habits you developed in that stage of life set the trajectory for, the way you want to live the rest of your life.
Wow. Wow. You said something that was really good. The, compromising your convictions is, and that's huge, because like you walk in with all these good intentions of staying strong and maintaining, and you've got this set of like what I call non-negotiables, right? That foundation
Mm-hmm.
that you're like, okay, I'm not gonna, and then next thing you know, it's almost like when you measure, I don't know, I've never laid tile, but I know that this is a thing. If you get off just a 1/32nd of an inch at the end, it's like 4 inches, right? As
Yeah.
you get offline. So I know you get, like you said, the little things. Okay, I can compromise. I'll at least go to this party. I'm not going to
Right.
drink, right? I'm not going to do any of this other, but I'm going to go just so I'm not an outcast. Well, then,
Mm-hmm.
okay, the next party you go to, right? What do? Well, I'll have one, or whatever it is. You fill in the blank. But like you said, those
Right.
little steps take you off of baseline eventually really far. And you look back and you're like, how did I get here? So,
Yeah.
you know, I, do you have an example of where you might have been tempted at one point? Or, how did you handle that situation?
Yeah. I think, uh, yeah, in terms of partying, I was, I didn't have a huge temptation there. Thankfully, I was able to,
Mhm.
stay away from that scene.
Yeah.
I think a language is one that can get in really easily, or you don't even
Sure.
think about. And it's funny because I was known as somebody that, would say all the weird or fake cuss words because I would try and find something to substitute. But I quickly realized whenever I was in a competitive environment, that started to shift, and I started to, succumb to, the culture of
Yeah.
the team and other guys. And um, it leads to like a lack of self-control in other
Sure.
areas, whether that be, pride or, yeah, just in relationship with others. And so
Mhm.
I think that's one that I even maybe struggle with today when I get in a competitive environment and have that mindset. It's
Yeah.
something that, you know, because of that compromise in college, I'm still having to deal with that habit. And
Mhm.
so it's something you have to, those things where you compromise become something you have to battle with on a daily basis.
Yeah. Yeah. And what we're, I hope the audience understands, like, we're not saying that perfection is necessarily the expectation,
Mm-hmm.
because we know that's never going to happen. So we get it. Like you're in the thick of the battle. And when you're in Rome, you kind of do as the Romans do sometimes. And what we're trying to accomplish here is giving you as an audience the tools and the mindset of, maybe I can be that influencer in that environment. Maybe I don't have to do what the Romans are doing when I'm in Rome, right? Maybe I can
Right.
create my own standard and people will gravitate to that. And they will, because they'll see the strength that it shows, and then the peace that you have throughout. And you're not emotionally a roller coaster like some people might tend to be when they're trapped in this worldly perspective. So I like that example, because I mean, everybody deals with something, right? Everybody's got their own brand of temptation, their own brand of, I don't know, I call it failure, I guess. If we're the standards here and then we
Yeah.
hit this mark, it's not a win necessarily. So, but it's good to hear that realistic perspective. And I hope somebody got that. I hope somebody understands that like you're not expected to be perfect, but man, so going through this whole deal, like you've got a list of things I want to cover, and man, you've laid the groundwork really well. And so, going in as a Christian, it's hard, especially when you're not surrounded by like-minded people. You're almost in hostile territory sometimes, it feels like. And you're trying to be that example. You're trying to set that standard. Man, did you have any kind of defining moment going through this process of college? I mean, you had challenges physically. Like, you're a football player at a college playing football, and you've had a season-ending injury every season. Like, not only do I wonder how the challenge of overcoming some of that were, and the rehab and all that, and the mental toll it takes, but I've also wondered, man, your expectation had to get a little skewed. You had to have a little bit of fear and doubt going into that next season. Like, oh man, I hope I don't re-injure. I don't, something else doesn't happen. Talk about your journey there and sort of how you had to overcome some of that negative mindset.
Definitely. Yeah. So as you mentioned earlier, I ended up having a shoulder injury towards the end of my senior year of high school. And so ended up having to get surgery on my labrum. And because of that, I had to redshirt. And so already to start college, my expectation of having a ton of success on the field kind of had a little setback already. And so, but I was still optimistic in terms of I had an extra year and could still use it. And so was able to use that year to train and get right. And I think the defining moment during my time in college was probably my sophomore year, when after that redshirt year in training and getting my body right, my shoulder continued to dislocate throughout the season. And so I then had to have another surgery. And so, yeah, like I mentioned, when I went to college, I expected to have a ton of success just because I'd worked my butt off to get to that point. And I took pride in the work that I put in, and those expectations got wrecked. And so I was frustrated and mad because every time I thought I was in the clear, it felt like I ended up taking 2 more steps back. And I grew up being preached to by my dad that hard work always pays off. And in this particular case, it wasn't paying off, at least in the way I wanted it to. And so this brought me to the sad reality that my identity and worth was so wrapped up in how people viewed me and respected me as an athlete. And so it was pretty sobering, because it was clear that the Lord wasn't my number one priority at that time.
Wow.
And so now, looking back on my time in college, it obviously, realizing that and understanding that and moving forward, knowing that, didn't make it any easier in the following seasons when I continued to rehab and felt like, I had to do twice the work to get back to square one versus everybody else. And so it didn't make it any easier, but I wouldn't have it any other way, because the Lord worked on my heart. And after the initial disappointment of each injury, it was these times that kind of pushed me to reflect and be so thankful for all the Lord had blessed me with. And so it's kind of, it's interesting looking back, because it's so ironic that in those times where you would think it's, the most frustrating time, or, you sit in that self-pity. After that, obviously that was there initially, but once I got past that, it was cool that the Lord began to, shift the posture of my heart and understand and look at, wow, I have so much to be thankful for. And I still have the opportunity, of chasing my dream, playing college football and getting a good education. So can't help but look at, what the Lord had done in my life and be thankful for what he had given me.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that's probably more mature than I would have been, and maybe you didn't start out there. Maybe you had to evolve into that level of maturity. But I would say, like, everybody's level of devastation is controllable, in my opinion. Like, the pain is guaranteed. Pain physically, pain mentally, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, whatever. Pain's guaranteed, but suffering's not. Suffering's optional. So that's a choice we make to suffer through the pain. And I think suffering, you would agree, is more of an emotional posture. So I guess to whoever's watching this, because there's a lot of athletes that are going to watch this, and some of those guys are, a paycheck to play that sport is their goal. That's their ultimate level of success. Did I succeed? Well, am I getting paid to do this? Am I in the NFL? Where am I, and so to have an injury like you're dealing with, like that could be devastating to somebody, is my point. So I guess my encouragement, and your encouragement, it sounds like, is to really try to self-regulate that level of devastation, because you're learning something through this battle. And what is God showing you, I think, is the key. And I say that to my kids all the time, like, okay, the result isn't necessarily what we're after. Yes, the goals, we have aspirations, but the significance through this journey to me is, what am I being shown, in good or bad? So if I'm dealing with a trial and I'm dealing with an injury and I'm dealing with setback, okay, God's showing me something. How's he building me? How am I growing out on the other side of this is where I hope we can get, right? Mentally.
Yeah.
And I know you probably go ahead, add to that. Yeah, no.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think in those times, it's so important to understand that, in the Bible, it says God's ways are higher than ours. And it also says in Romans, all things work together for the good of those who love God. Yeah. And so I think understanding those two things, and understanding what God has promised us, and knowing that if we're seeking after him and we're in his will, there's no better place to be, because he's got our best interest in mind. And so realizing and understanding that was so monumental for me, and it's so freeing, knowing that the Lord's got your back. And although it may not look like that in your external circumstances, he's going to be there, and you're not going to be left in the dust.
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing. And what I hope people can grab onto from a hope standpoint is, man, maybe God's closing doors too. Like maybe, we're trying to fit our square peg in a round hole sometimes, and we feel like we just need to use a bigger hammer if it's not going right. Mm-hmm. Maybe he's showing us there's a different way for us. And so I don't know. I just think, we think, oh, God didn't, let me do this. This was my dream and this didn't happen. So God just, kind of trashed that dream for me. Well, maybe that wasn't his plan. Like you said, he knows more than we do. And so I'm really grateful for, not to be country song cliche guy, but unanswered prayers aren't a bad thing sometimes,
right.
And closing doors that only he closes is for a reason. So, man, that's good encouragement that you had. And that's a good experience that you had, because like not everybody has a season-ending injury every season. Like that's a unique thing. And for you to come out on the other side of that and still like, hey, I knew God had a plan. I knew I was just going to keep coming back harder and training and getting there and working, because you just never know. So great encouragement.
And like you said too, that was not it's easy to explain it in a couple minutes, but that took years to get to. Like you said, that's not something that happens overnight.
Right. Well, I get it. And I don't know that I would have even gotten there, maybe I would have just swallowed and fell into that pit of self-pity. Cause I know there's people listening right now who might be in that. Somebody listening might be right in the middle of this, and the valley looks like it's never ending to them. Mm-hmm. The pit is what it is. And that's where I'm going to be forever. It's not. Like, understand God's working in you and he's going to pull you out the other side of that. So, man, if we're talking about encouraging people listening to this, and we're talking to athletes, Christian athletes fighting every day just to earn a job on the field, let alone battling another enemy that we can't see, and trying to stay on that walk of Christian foundations and principles. Man, what would you say to yourself if you were a guy listening to this podcast and you were 20 years old, right? What do you say to the younger Isaac Williams right now? If you could give him some sort of, or 18-year-old guy coming into college, what would you say to him?
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, I would just say a from a relational standpoint, I think, we're not meant to go through this battle alone, and you got to find people to link arms with and go through this everyday battle, because following the Lord, especially in this season, it's an everyday choice. And
Yeah.
so the moment you start to, as we mentioned, compromise on that choice, it just becomes harder and harder. And so I think the biggest thing is just being able to find community and be able to, spur each other on to continue pressing on towards the goal of, seeking first the kingdom of God and
Yeah.
knowing him and making him known to others. And so that's what I would say from a relational and a spiritual standpoint.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, no, that was said really well too. Like, I appreciate how clear that was, and just for somebody to grab on to one thing of this interview, like, I think that might be huge for somebody what they just heard you say. Because if you're if you're verbalizing something that you would have told yourself, it must mean something. Yeah, it must have some meat on
Definitely.
the bone, right? So
Yeah.
hopefully somebody was locked into that. That was awesome. So, man, as we kind of try to close this out, and it's been a great story, it's been a great journey to kind of walk through some of this with you, because I can just imagine some of the toil mentally that you went through, and it wasn't always roses, right? It wasn't always,
Yeah.
oh, look at the perfect Christian I am through this process. I bet it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't. So, um, but I bet you somebody was watching that. Like, I bet one of your teammates or some, classmate, somebody on the side, outside looking in, man, finish a sentence for me along the context lines of this conversation. So I know I made an impact in the lives of my teammates because.
Yeah, because I think they saw that I was imperfect, but in that they knew, um, they were able to see that in that impurity or imperfectness, um, we're still able to have a relationship with God. And so guys respected what I stood for, and they confided in me because they knew I would hear them out and I wouldn't immediately judge them. And so I think just through the example that the Lord portrayed of the gospel through this time, understanding that, it took work. When without Christ, I wasn't able to, change my heart posture. And so they were able to see that transformation and understand that, okay, I don't have to be all perfect and buttoned up, um, to make an impact and to seek the Lord. I can come just as I am.
Oof, that's a good one there. I like that. I like that because people feel disqualified all the time.
Yeah.
They feel like, man, my past, what I did last night,
Yep.
wow, I could never come to the Lord. I could never get in prayer and just boldly come to the throne and say, look, take it from me. I'm yours. No, people feel like they can't do that, right?
Hmm.
Just because of their background, their past, their sin, whatever. But man, it's awesome. There's never a wrong time to do that. So, I mean,
Yep.
empower yourselves to go and just make that change, make that heart change and commit to God and watch what he does. But so I'm going to give you one off script here, Isaac, as we close
All
out.
right.
Something we didn't talk about, something you weren't prepared for. Um, Give somebody one practical tool or way to actually, like, what would be your suggestion on how to make time for connecting with other like-minded, faith-based people on a college campus? I mean, I know there's resources, but man, give them something. Like, how did that get carved into your day with all that you had going on?
Yeah, that's good. That's a tough one. Um, I think the beauty of college is that there's so many different opportunities that colleges and universities put out to get plugged in. And so if you're, let's say, you don't necessarily have those Christian clubs that you can go to, or
Right.
you know, it doesn't fit with your schedule, stuff like that, making time to get plugged in to those different events and just develop relationship and a level of trust with people, in whatever scenario or group or club that is huge. And it takes being bold. And so in developing that trust and relationship with others, the Lord will give you discernment, and you'll be able to, you know, kind of see what people are maybe living differently, or maybe even open to faith. And you know, just being bold and whether it be inviting those people to church or different things like that. I think people in college are so, because it's a new experience, a lot of people are open to, you know, new things and new relationship. And so it actually makes it a really cool grounds for, you know, getting off on, you know, the right foot with people and developing that trust. And through that trust, and when you gain that respect, you're able to share things like that, and people are like, oh, like I can identify with that, and you're able to find those people, or even be bold and invite people to, you know, do a Bible study or go to church, things like that. So, you know, we're called to be bold, and the Bible says it's not easy to be a Christian, and so I think it kind of takes some initiative on our end to make that happen.
Yeah, it does. It does. It doesn't, I'll tell you, it doesn't just come to you. I promise you. It doesn't just come knocking on your door. But yeah, I would say at the very least too, there's a lot of technology out there. If you've got a couple of guys on your team or wherever in your class that you can't make it to a service or an activity or an event because you're scared, like lock down, hunker down in your dorm room or whatever, and turn on a podcast. I'm even if it's not this one, it's another one. There's so many out there. There's no excuse to not have a resource, is what my point is. So get those guys together, go through a Bible study on an app, on a, you know, whatever it is. There's something you can do to get fuel in you, the Word of God in you, and then just kind of refresh and reset, replug, whatever. But I think there's avenues for you to take. So man, it's been awesome to get to know you, to hear your story. And I think the audience really relates to what you went through and how you overcame, and just your transparency that you know, it's not a perfection journey. It's a progress journey, and just staying plugged into the Lord, and he'll pull you along and show you ways to overcome. So, and audience, you heard it. He said there's no excuse. I did actually, but I was putting words in his mouth. But no excuse to not have a resource, man. Stay plugged into your teammates. Be an example. Be that non-negotiable foundational influencer. Until next time, he's been Isaac Williams. We've been Last in Line. Be blessed.